thank the Ships2Shores program and especially Mira, who has graciously trusted me to talk to you about sailing, this time from a sustainability perspective, and of course, invite you from this approach to discover our Canadian waters and its opportunities and challenges. So can everybody confirm that you are seeing the PowerPoint, please? Perfect. So it's a great pleasure to speak to you today about sailing and about oceans. We know that sailing is one of the most exciting adventures a human can experience in a lifetime, especially for the direct interaction with our natural resources and the oceans. Sailing, as no other activity, offers us a breathtaking view of nature's force. Without acknowledging the power of nature and without understanding its rule, it's not possible to navigate. So despite all the recent technological advances, only those who navigate know that the power of nature surpasses us. Understand the winds, currents, and tides allow the first humans and still allow us to transport, communicate, feed, enjoy, and benefit from our natural resources. However, some of the consequences of these activities, including global warming and biodiversity loss, pose an existential threat to humanity. That is why no sailor's education is complete without understanding our impact on the oceans and waters. So today, I'm here to give you some highlights about the initiatives that exist today to embrace sustainable development in sailing. You may know about some of them, you may don't know about others, but I'm going to use them as examples to give you a broad sense of what is happening in sailing today. I prepared this presentation organized in 3 sections. At the end, I hope we have a clearer understanding of certain aspects that we'll discuss here. I have to say that I found very, very attractive that one of the objectives of the Ships2Shores program is to increase youth attachment to Canada, promoting sailing activities, but also the opportunities that Canada's marine industries offers. So with this in mind, I included some information about our maritime sector, and I hope this results useful and interesting for you today. So, and then our sections are Canada as a maritime nation, conservation and sustainable use of our waters, sailing and sustainability initiatives. So let's start saying why Canada is a maritime nation. I want to begin by showing you the findings of a recent study conducted by the Angus Reid Institute in partnership with the Clear Seas Center for Responsible Marine Shipping. Well, it's a study about shipping, means transportation of goods by ocean. And I found very interesting this question, and I want to share it with you. To what extent, if at all, do you identify with Canada being a maritime or a seafaring nation? The options are strongly identify with that, a fair amount, a bit, and I don't identify with that at all. So let's see the findings. Only 60% say that they strongly identify with that. Let's say in total, roughly half of Canadians, 52%, say identify strongly or far among with Canada being a seafaring nation. The comprehensive table of this study for this specific question showed that those living on the coast, as well as men 55 years old and older, are more likely to identify Canada as it. Our young people between 18 and 34 and the women group are the less identify Canada as a maritime nation, as you can see on this slide. That's very interesting and shows the potential that programs like Ships2Shores have in our youth community and underrepresented groups in the marine sector, including young women, because there is also a gender gap here. As you know, maritime is a very male dominated industry. So it's important to encourage their participation because in this industry, our young people can find a source of jobs, sports, recreation, education, entrepreneurship, innovation, and consequently more attachment to Canada. Without a doubt, Canada is a maritime nation and our geographical position plays a determinant role in this statement. Our strategic location allows us to have marine coasts bordering the Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic Oceans, representing 244,000 kilometers of coastline. It's a well-known fact for all of us that Canada is the country with the longest coastline in the world. That's amazing, isn't it? Well, this is certainly a source of pride and opportunities for all Canadians. And of course, it involves responsibilities as well, because these waters are central to Canada's heritage, culture, and economy. All the particularities of the North, East, and West Coast comprise the Canadian identity, which is historically linked to its coasts and natural resources. Indigenous communities share deep spiritual and cultural ties with the land and oceans. Historical European settlement was directly linked to proximity to the coasts, rivers, gulfs, and lakes. And today, more than 7 million Canadians are located along the coast and the St. Lawrence River. But more importantly, all Canadians benefit today in some way from the use of ocean, seas, and marine resources. And marine or maritime sector is an essential part of our communities, ecosystems, and economic accomplishments. So these activities, such as transport and fisheries, plus tourism, oil, gas, and energy industries, directly benefit from oceans and internal waters, and therefore their sustainable use and their protection are indisputable priorities that materialize by the strengthening of the marine safety system, which is designed to protect life, health, property, and the marine environment, of course. Before we go any further, I just want to say that when we talk about the maritime sector, it's easy to find information and statistics about fishery and shipping, but it's important to broaden our scope of other marine activities and have more available information that allow us to have the whole picture. So I think we have a room here for improvement, which translates into more opportunities in terms of research and analytics. Our oceans, lakes, and rivers support diverse plant and animal habitats, forests, and essential ecosystem services such as water purification. Canadian economy remains highly dependent on resource extraction, processing, and transportation of oil, gas, pulp, and paper, as well as intensive agriculture. All of these sectors are heavily reliant on water and have a cost to the natural environment and our water resources. I really love this subject, but I don't want to stop long here. I just want to highlight the critical role of our waters in our more deeply Canadian identity, also in our economy and in the immense potential and opportunities for all of us, and challenges too. That is why I want to make the transition to the second point of this presentation, conservation and sustainable use of our waters, saying that the same study of the public attitudes about the shipping industry by the Angus Reid Institute show us that Canadians are very aware of the environmental risk associated with the use of our water, especially in shipping and fishery, and consequently, they are aware of the balance that should exist between the economic contribution versus the environmental risk. So you can watch in this graphic the potential safety issues that come to mind when people think about shipping in Canadian waters. There are different types of risks, but by far the environmental risk is the most significant in this study. And more interesting, when we check the comprehensive table, we see that people between 18 and 34 have the biggest concerns about greenhouse gas emissions and pollution as the most potential risk in comparison with other ranges of age. So what I want to show here is, yes, maybe it's the young people who less identify Canada as a maritime nation, but at the same time, it's the young people who are more aware of the environmental issues. And I insist one more time, it's an excellent opportunity to encourage them to learn more about our Canadian waters and participate in activities related to them through the integration, of course, of the sustainability perspective, which can awake interest in this segment of our population. So the second part, conservation and sustainable use of our Canadian waters. Let me give you some context about the sustainability or sustainable development. Most of you are familiar with the term, but in my experience talking about sustainability, I have noticed that frequently it's understood just from its environmental side. One of the best definitions of sustainable development, in my opinion, is the definition by the Brundtland Commission, which in 1987, in the final report called Our Common Future, defined sustainable development as the one that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Fundamental to sustainable development is a common understanding that this is essential to satisfying human needs and improving quality of life, but that must be based on the efficient and responsible use of our natural, human, and economic resources. So the term is much broader in scope. Sustainable development moves beyond essential environmental concerns and involves all its three interconnected dimensions. As we can see here, the three pillars, environmental, social, and economic, also informally referred to as the three P's, people, planet, and profit. All of them are crucial, and the ideal is to achieve a balance between these elements. Please let me come back here. There we go. This definition by the Brundtland Commission was an effort to unify the concept of sustainable development, and it's considered one of the significant precedents for what we know now as the Sustainable Development Goals or 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So what is this agenda about? Well, it's a global effort, an ambitious action plan to end poverty, reduce inequality, and protect the planet from climate change ravages. The agenda focuses on the commitment to leave no one behind. It has 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, that aim to address today's challenges. Very ambitious, I know, because basically these goals recognize that ending poverty must go hand in hand with the strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth while tackling climate change. I know it's ambition, but we need to be ambitious here. This is a light that guides us in this journey to face the biggest challenges in our history. This agenda was adopted by Canada and all United Nations members in September 2015, the same year of the Paris Agreement, about which we'll talk later in this presentation when we talk about climate change. Here in Canada, these objectives are being led by the government because we need internal policies and international commitments. But of course, it's impossible to do it without the participation of civil society, academia, NGOs, indigenous people, private sector, citizens, and communities. One of the remarkable things in this agenda is that it's a common effort. We have national and international regulations, tools, indicators, guides, protocols, and platforms that help us go in the same direction. That is why it's essential to know them, spread them, and most importantly, to work for their achievement. So this what you watch on your screen is the list of the SDGs. They are 17 goals with 169 targets and more than 230 indicators. I find easier and very educational to classify the goals by pillar, but as I mentioned, the SDGs are interlinked and indivisible. The achievement of any goal is linked to the accomplishment of others. I mean, we cannot have sustainable cities and communities if we don't have industry, innovation, infrastructure, and affordable clean energy. We cannot have good health if we don't have clean water, or we cannot have decent work and economic opportunities if we don't achieve high quality education or gender equality. So they are totally interconnected, and consequently, each of them has an impact on the three pillars. It's, however, true that some activities are directly linked with some goals. Let's say for the conservation and sustainable use of the ocean, seas, and marine resources, we have the goal 14, life below water, and for taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts, we have the goal 13. So when we talk about sailing as a sport or a recreational or educational activity, we can link it to goals that will always be present in this activity, like below water, climate change. But at the end, each goal can be impacted because again and again, the goals are interlinked and indivisible. We'll see this point in further detail when we talk about the sustainability initiatives in sailing. But before, let me expand on these two goals briefly. Goal 14, life below water, and goal 13, climate action. They are closely connected and we cannot talk about one without the other. And of course, they have a significant impact on sailing and in maritime activities in general. Our water, lakes, rivers, and oceans play a determinant role in climate change. Last month, I listened to a conference and they said something fascinating about the ocean. The ocean is not a victim, it's a hero in the combat of climate change. If not for the ocean, we'd be in even worse trouble with too much CO2. Why? Because more than 93% of all the heat people have added to the planet since the 50s has been absorbed by the oceans. That's amazing, right? But we have to understand that there is a price to pay. Now we see the consequences of that absorption of CO2 that generates rising ocean temperature and acidification. To take action, we need to understand some basic concepts like climate change. So what is climate change, or what is the climate change we can control? Because greenhouse gases occur naturally and are essential to life on Earth. But after more than a century and a half of industrialization, deforestation, agriculture, quantities of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere have risen to record levels not seen in 3 million years. Although greenhouse gas emissions are projected to drop about 6% this year due to travel bans and economic slowdowns resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, this improvement is only temporary. Once the global economy begins to recover from the pandemic, emissions are expected to return to higher levels. So in the UN's words, United Nations words, we need consistent and permanent actions to address both the pandemic and the climate emergency. So if climate change is also a natural process, what is the climate change that we need to take action on? As you can see, or as you can watch on this slide, climate change means a change of climate which is attributed to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere and which is in addition to natural climate observed over comparable time periods. So yes, we talk about climate change due to human activities, mainly due to our dependence on fossil fuels, deforestation, agriculture, extensive cattle ranching. So here's when we talk about the famous Paris Agreement that is so important because for the first time brings all nations into a common cause to undertake ambitious efforts to combat climate change and adapt to its effects. At the conference of the UN Framework Convention of Climate Change in Paris in 2015, they reached a landmark agreement to combat climate change and accelerate and intensify the actions and investments needed for a sustainable, low-carbon future. The Paris Agreement's central aim is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping the global temperature rise this century below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Sadly, maritime transportation, which is one of the most pollutant sectors in terms of emissions, noise, and oil spills, was exempted from emissions reductions under the Paris Agreement. That is crazy, isn't it? Well, it was because cheap emissions are hard to attribute to any single nation. The problem lies in deciding which country to assign carbon emissions when ships are almost always outside national borders. The issue is further complicated by the fact that the actual nationality of vessels is often different from that of their owners or operators. This applies particularly to flags of convenience. So yes, it's complicated also because remember that 90% of global trade is linked to shipping. So it's a real global economy issue. So it's natural that some nations and companies try to avoid controls about gas emissions. For those reasons, we have to wait until 2018 when the International Maritime Organization, IMO, adopted an initial strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from ships. It's what we know as the Paris Agreement for International Shipping. And with this agreement, we expect to reduce the total annual greenhouse gases emissions by at least 50% by 2050 compared to 2008. So there are many impacts of climate change, but let's concentrate on ocean impacts. Acidification, that basically is a reduction in the pH of the ocean caused primarily by uptake of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Of course, the increase of temperatures in the ambience raises the ocean temperature as well, melting Arctic sea ice, causing natural disasters that affect vulnerable regions and coastal communities, including, well, especially our Arctic and its indigenous people, Inuits, and coastal communities. And of course, we know the extremely negative consequences like migration or relocation of communities, poverty, conflicts for food security, economic losses. It's a very complicated scenario. And we are talking just about climate change. Still, our waters have other challenges. We need to face plastic pollution, overfishing, oil spills, noise, and some non-eco-friendly infrastructures like ports of offshore platforms. But please don't lose hope. Let's remember that the ocean is a hero. Healthy and resilient oceans help mitigate the effects of climate change, provide food security to millions of people worldwide, and drive economic activity through marine trade, transport, tourism. Our oceans are wonderful, right? So there are many initiatives, actions, and programs to face these challenges. The SDGs, the Ocean Conference, the Sustainable Ocean Business Action Platform, the Strategy on Reduction of Greenhouse Gas Emissions from Ships. There are NGOs doing a fantastic job around the world every day. So let's not lose hope. Here in Canada, we have the Canadian Oceans Protection Plan, just to mention a few initiatives. But the way this presentation in PowerPoint will be available for all of you. So I included in this slide some initiatives links in case you guys want further details. I also included a link to connect directly to our website and consult the progress for each goal, even with information about what is happening now, taking into consideration the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, you can consult by country if you want to check the Canadian progress. So you can find there all this information. It's going to be available for you. Well, to finish this part, this second part and start talking about sailing, I just want to make a special mention to the Canadian Oceans Protection Plan. It's a governmental program launched in November 2016, and so far the largest investment ever made to protect Canada's coast and waterways while growing the economy. The Oceans Protection Plan has 5 fundamental objectives: support safe and clean marine shipping, build partnerships with Indigenous and coastal communities, increase economic opportunities for Canadians, improves marine safety systems, and protect the marine environment. In the previous slide, I included the Oceans Protection Plan link that brings us directly to the marine training program that I think is very interesting because it's focused on raising public awareness, training and job opportunities for underrepresented groups in the marine sector, including women, Inuit, and Indigenous people, developing marine training programs that reflect traditional knowledge and the learning needs of isolated and remote coastal communities, and provide infrastructure, equipment, and new technology to improve marine training and local access to training. So it's really, really about marine training. So maybe for some of you, this information is useful in case you want to apply for a specific training as an opportunity to have a career in this maritime industry and contribute to your community and, well, the whole Canada plan to protect our oceans. And voila, sustainability initiatives in sailing. With the 70% of the Earth covered by water, it's easy to understand why sailing has been part of the construction of human civilization. Lands with access to water were attractive locations for the first communities because they provided drinking water, made the ground fertile for agriculture, and allowed easy transportation and communication. Sailing can be dated as far back as prehistoric times. You can see on this slide one of the first evidence of a boat, which dates from 8000 BC. Of course, it was a long process of incremental changes and innovations that got us today. From the beginnings, when sailors accomplished navigation by using primitive charts and observations of the sun and stars, the idea of using a sail to move through the water went on to change our world forever. Sailing has been around for travel, fishing, transportation, but it's only become a sport or a recreational activity since the early 17th century and had its first appearance as an Olympic sport in Paris 1900. Today, it's a sport, a pastime enjoyed by millions of people worldwide, from the lakes and rivers to the wide open ocean. Sailing also represents a great opportunity to discover other maritime activities that impact the economy, and why not, to promote social development, engaging people and changing behaviors. So you can imagine all the initiatives that exist today to promote the best practices. It would be impossible to mention all of them. So I chose some of the most representatives, but I'm totally open if any of you have or know about an initiative that is not mentioned today. Please share it with us. It will be very enriching. Your comments and inputs are more than welcome. So from the 3 pillars that we have mentioned in the second point of this presentation, sailing offers us several possibilities to work. Just imagine the opportunities that open up when you embrace sustainability. First of all, it drives positive change. I don't know if you are aware, but the United Nations stated in the political declaration for the new 2030 agenda that sport is an essential enabler of sustainable development due to its global reach and appeal. Some of the core values in sport are also fundamental principles for peaceful and joyous societies. Respect, equality, teamwork, ethics. Those are core values in sailing as well. So with these initiatives, we can contribute to the realization of more inclusive societies. Then environmental awareness and climate action. Sailing plays a privileged role in the protection of natural resources by its direct interaction with the ocean, as we mentioned in the previous part of this presentation. Engage stakeholders, participants, attendees, fans, communities, workforce, volunteers, event organizers, sailing organization, teams, clubs, regulatory institutions, local businesses, and I could go on, the list is a long one, local governments as well. Increase corporate partnerships and sponsor. It means build strong relationships with partners through shared sustainability projects that represents opportunities for them, including economic and reputational benefits for both parties. Development of new business models based on renewable energy, resources, green growth, ecotourism, and climate-friendly finance. All of these under the corporate social responsibility umbrella, the blue and circular economy, and other innovative business models. Job opportunities in sailing and maritime industries, and this is very important. Training in specific marine skills delivers a significant added value to our members. Skills development is a fundamental base for decent work as a path to self-advancement of women and men, and also represents an economic stability of communities and families. And of course, is an integral component of strategies for growth and development. Innovation and technology, reflecting in equipment, new materials, construction, systems development for navigation, clean energy, which involves science and design. Events and infrastructure for sailing clubs, marinas, training centers, shipyards. That represents also progress for the local and coastal communities where those facilities are located and where competitions, regattas, and trainings are held. Development and inspiration for other industries, because sailing is a source of ideas and innovation. As we can watch on this slide, there are current projects that use traditional energy source and generate their own electricity on board with solar panels, wind generators in order to become zero carbon emissions in industries like transportation, tourism, shipping. They see carefully what is happening in sailing today in order to reduce their footprint, reduce noise, and also reduce cost and saving money on their operational costs. It's an investment because change the paradigm and the equipment could be expensive at the beginning, but at the end, these clean technologies are more efficient and therefore less consuming. So it's also an investment. Sustainability is also a challenge for the sailboat industry. Just to mention that for the 2028 Olympic Games, 90% of the sailboat by weight must be recyclable. Also, sailboats won't be solely relying on fossil fuels to produce power on board or for auxiliary drive by 2030. So this means innovation, new technology, and of course, business opportunities for companies and suppliers in this industry. So here we have some sailing initiatives, very representative of what is currently being done. The International Maritime Organization, IMO, is the United Nations specialized agency with responsibility for the safety and security of shipping and the prevention of marine and atmospheric pollution by ships. It lists regulation about low carbon emission, as we mentioned before, and establishes and sets the standards to be followed for the maritime industry and for the sailing community as well, marine facilities, etc. So it's always a reliable point of reference for us. World Sailing is the world governing body for the sport of sailing. It's responsible for the promotion of the sport, managing sailing at the Olympic and Paralympic Games, It's responsible for developing the racing rules and sailing and regulations for all sailing competitions. World Sailing's sustainability agenda is an extraordinary example of how sailing contributes to the United Nations 2030 agenda. It's a remarkable effort to embrace the holistic concept of sustainability in sailing. I want to thank Dan Reading, the head of sustainability at World Sailing, who has been doing an amazing job with this agenda. Sail Canada is the national governing body for the sport of sailing, and of course is member of the World Sailing as a national authority. The provincial sailing associations here in Canada and member clubs and schools are also part of Sailing Canada, who foster the development and promotion of sailing in our country, providing services and programs to clubs and sailors, and of course, managing the participation of our Olympic and Paralympic team. Sail Training International, whose purpose is the development and education of young people through sail training experiences. They are the organizers of the world famous tall ships races and regattas, and of course promote sustainable behavior and environmental awareness among young people. And of course, Tall Ships Canada and Ships2Shores, our host today, a pan-Canadian project which aims to provide knowledge and experiences for youth in the areas of sailing, coastal communities and their people, developing a stronger attachment to Canada. Amazing initiative. Well, and Tall Ships Canada represents Canadian sail training operators, Canadian maritime heritage organizations and partners who support the advancement of education and training, career opportunities, best practices in the sailing and marine industry. So this is their social and economic contribution. From the environmental side, they are members of the Sail Training Blue Flag Scheme, where participating vessel operators sign a code of conduct that applies to everyone on board to minimize their impact on the marine environment, both at sea and in port. Clean Seas. Great. United Nations Environment launched Clean Seas in February 2017 with the aim of addressing the plastic pollution problem through standards and policies that reduce marine litter. So they promote and participate in expeditions, regattas, engaging governments, the general public and the private sector in the fight against marine plastic pollution. Ocean Race, one of the biggest sport events in the world, is a demonstration of athletic endurance and love for the ocean. And they have taken the plastic pollution issue seriously. They have a very famous ocean summit and a fantastic sustainability agenda. And without doubt, sustainability is a core value of the race. They have been making extraordinary efforts to restore ocean health and lead, inspire, and engage people in this cause. Very related, the 11th Hour Racing that works with the sailing community and maritime industries to advance solutions and practices that protect and restore the health of our ocean through sponsorships to integrate sustainability into their values and operations while educating, innovating, and inspiring people with the critical message of ocean stewardship. So it's a fantastic initiative from the sponsorship perspective. Well, there are gender equality initiatives as well. For instance, the strategic review into women in sailing delivered by the World Sailing Trust, it focuses on increasing gender diversity across the sport. But the way sailing has become the first Olympic sport to sign the United Nations Women's Sport for Generation Equality Declaration, and happily, the number of women teams in the world is increasing. So we can see some examples here, like the SCA team. So many hundreds of non-governmental organizations, agencies, platforms working to promote all these values. So all of these very encouraging for the sailing community. To conclude, I want to highlight the sustainability agenda of the World Sailing. As I mentioned before, the world governing body for the sport of sailing and share with you this initiative because this serves as a guide to enhance the economic, social, and environmental performance in sailing by delivering results and progress to achieve the United Nations goals, the Paris Agreement, and other international agreements and platforms. So the World Sailing Agenda is closely aligned with the 5 priority areas on which the International Olympic Committee focuses its medium and long-term sustainability objectives: infrastructure and natural sites, sourcing and resource management, mobility, workforce, and climate. The operational areas which World Sailing delivers sustainability through are technical standards, events, training, venue and facilities, members, and participation. And all these areas and their objectives are linked to a specific sustainable development goal, as you can watch on this slide. This is what it makes us so special. So I know it's a lot of information to take in, and this is just the basics. So this is an invitation to deepen the sustainability initiatives, and please, if you want further details or you have a question, a comment, please let me know. This is my email, my website. So just contact me and I promise to answer all your questions. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. That was really informative. We have some time for questions. So would anyone like to ask Alexandra anything about the presentation? You can unmute yourselves or you can put it in the Q&A section. Are there any questions about, oh, there we go. So we have a question here, I'll read it out. Could you please let us know more on how to promote gender equality? I'm assuming within the marine sector or within sailing.
About gender equality?
Yes. So what are some of the initiatives that we can adopt to improve gender equality?
Well, fortunately, Canada is a country with embraced diversity. So all the initiatives that I mentioned are focused on women as well. There is a cup here, I don't know if you know, Femina, to promote female leadership, to encourage and support the participation of women and girls in sailing. But yes, there is an evident gender gap in the maritime industry. It's a very mainly dominated sector. I think it's because, well, in part it's a stereotype, but I think we really need to work to improve the conditions for women in the industry. In sailing as a sport, there has been considerable progress. I just mentioned a couple of initiatives during the presentation. The strategic review into women in sailing, or the UN Women's Sport for Generation Equality declaration. But of course, we need to keep working to promote participation and to improve the conditions, training, salaries, facilities for women in vessels. By the way, there is a panel in 2 weeks, right? I think Mira may want to take the opportunity to invite for that panel.
Yeah, so Ships2Shores at the end of the month on November 27th will be hosting a panel on women in the marine sector. So including Alexandra, we have 5 other panelists who come from various areas, all women, leading professionals. And the purpose of that panel is to provide young people, especially young women, with an idea of, the opportunities, the challenges they faced, opportunities to network as well, and to give young people more insight into the marine sector, because I think, like Alexandra has said, there's just not a lot of information about it, and especially young women aren't really told or encouraged to see it as a potential career.
Excellent. So everybody is invited to this panel. So, well,
other questions or comments? Feel free to post in the chat or unmute your mic.
You can send me questions if you need more further information.
Alexandra, I actually had a question for you. You talked about how a lot of people don't see Canada as a seafaring nation.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is, and what do you think we need to do to improve that perception?
Well, as I told you, I think it's a stereotype, you know, in maritime industry is associated to a very old industry. So we need to show the benefits and the opportunities that the industry, but I don't know if you know that 90% of the commerce is linked to shipping. So, but there are a lot of opportunities as well in investigation, research, and other sports also. So I think it's a matter of information. Yes, of course.
Any other questions or comments for Alexandra? Otherwise, you can always email her. How do we attend the panel on the 27th? You can head to our website at ships2shores.ca. There's an activity page, and you will see the panel for women in the marine sector, and you can register through our website. I can also post that in the chat. And just a reminder that I did post the survey link again for those of you who weren't here when I was talking about it. It's a survey that's required by our funder, which is the Ministry of Heritage. And it's just a way for us to report back on who's been attending our webinars. It's all anonymous, but it's important for us for delivering these projects in the future. So I'm just going to link you to the Women in the Marine Sector panel in the chat. So feel free to register there. If we don't have any other questions or comments, then I will thank Alexandra for her wonderful presentation. If you have any more comments for her, feel free to email her. If you have any comments for me, you can reach me at mira.phillips@ships2shores.ca, or you can contact us through the website. But thank you everybody for coming, and keep an eye out on Ships2Shores. We have a lot of activities planned between now and the end of March.
Thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.